Worthy of every song we could ever sing. You're worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You are worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. 'Cause I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Amen.
Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. I'm Cody. I'm the digital pastor here. And before anything else, we need you to hear this, that we're a no matter church. And what that means is no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or even what's been done to you, we need you to know that God loves you, that we love you, and we are really glad that you're here. So good job being here today. And if you're new, maybe you're here for the first time, or maybe you've been here for a while and you just haven't taken that step to become known, I encourage you to take that step here today. It's one of our big steps here, because we know when you become known, when you get connected, when you meet others, when you ask questions, God uses that in significant ways. So I encourage you to take that step here today. And if you do, I'll send you an Amazon gift card just as a thank you. So right here in this moment, all you need to do is take out your phone. You can text PLC, it's just 3 letters, to 99581. But we are going to continue in our Stories Jesus Told series here today. So let's kick to Pastor Jesse.
Jesus was teaching in a crowd of thousands, like so many people that it says they were like stepping on each other. And in a pause in Jesus' teaching, some guy in the crowd decides that this is his moment to try to get Jesus to settle something for him. So he says, "Hey, teacher, yeah, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But Jesus was not going to get involved in this family drama. So he says to him, "Dude," well, he probably didn't say dude, "who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Jesus saw this guy's intentions were kind of shady, and he was just being greedy. So he gives him a warning. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Then Jesus told them a story. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And so he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to put all my grain." Then he said, "I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And then I'll have place for all of my surplus grain. And then I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "Oh, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded of you. Then what will happen to all that you have prepared for yourself?" Then Jesus finished with this. "This is how it will be for whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God."
Hey, welcome all of you to Prairie Lakes. We're really glad that you're here. If this is your first weekend with us, or maybe it's been like hit and miss for you, here's what you're dropping into this weekend. We're in a series, and we've been in a series now that we're calling The Stories Jesus Told. The Stories Jesus Told. And so in the Bible, there are 4 Gospels, 4 books that tell the story of Jesus. And that's all they talk about: what he said, what he did, what he taught, things like that, his life, his ministry here on earth. And in those 4 Gospels, we have a lot of different kinds of material. We have lessons that Jesus taught to his disciples. We have some records of interactions that he had with people. We have sermons of his. But we also have really what are a collection of just a bunch of stories. Just stories Jesus told. And we call these stories parables, okay? So here's what a parable is. That word parable it's actually a combination of 2 words. It's the word para, meaning near, and the word ballo, meaning to cast or to put. So literally like to put near something, right? Literally to compare. It's a comparison. It's a story that's a comparison. In fact, every story that Jesus tells in the Gospels is a comparison of some kind. He's just going to throw down these stories next to something or alongside something that he's seeing, or something that someone does, or something that someone says, or a lesson that he's trying to teach. He's going to lay down one of these stories beside it as a way to help people realize or recognize something. And usually what he's trying to help people realize or recognize is something about how life with God works. Jesus speaks in parables, or he tells these stories as a way of helping people realize or recognize, see how life with God really works. And he almost has to do this. Like, he almost doesn't have a choice but to do this. He has to tell stories that are going to help people see or recognize something about how life with God actually works. Why does he almost have to do this? Well, it's because the story that's in front of people every single day, with their own two eyes, is just very, very different from how life with God works. Every single day before his people's eyes, and ours too, on repeat, here's the stories that just predictably and utterly play out all the time. Predictably and utterly, all the stories that play out in front of our eyes are shaped by sin. They're shaped by brokenness. Every single day on repeat. For example, one of the stories that plays out over and over again is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? Right in front of our eyes for thousands of years now. Or the story of absolute power corrupting absolutely, but still protecting those who are corrupted. That story plays out time and time again. That's kind of how our world works. So, and of course, let's not forget the story of our world being just a wild and dangerous place. Sickness could get you, an invading country could get you, a robber on the road could get you, 1,000 ways to die, so to speak. And not only that, but this happens to anybody, anytime, anywhere. Doesn't matter if you're good, doesn't matter if you're bad. That story kind of plays out time and time again. And so this is why Jesus has to tell these stories about how life with God works. Because why? Well, he has to speak in parables because life with God does work. It does, but it works very differently. It works very differently from the stories that we're most familiar with. Life with God works, but it works really differently than what we see every single day. And so he has to tell these stories, and these stories can really help us see something that we really probably struggle to see. So one final thing before we jump into one of Jesus' parables this week, and just one final thing, that's this. How do we interpret these parables? How do we know what they mean? And this is an important question, primarily because they're stories, They're not newspaper articles. They're not chapters in textbooks, They're stories. And stories are stories, right? Stories can have meaning, they can have lessons, they can have takeaways, and every single one of Jesus' stories does, but stories are also, they're just pretty easy to read things into them or to take things out of them that aren't meant to be, And so just a few principles for us as we kind of read these stories that Jesus told. How do we find the point? How do we find the point in the stories that Jesus told? 3 quick things here. Number 1 is just focus on the main character, okay? Focus on the main character. If you're trying to figure out what Jesus is, why he's telling it, what comparison he's trying to make, what lesson he's trying to teach, it's usually in the main character, number 1. Number 2, most parables just have a single point. There's not like 50 layers of meaning, and when he talks about this, I think that really symbolizes, no, it's not that. It's very straightforward. Usually just at one point, maybe 2 or 3, but no more than that. Usually just a single point attached to the main character. And number 3 is this. Stories made perfect sense in the first century. These stories made perfect sense to you if you lived at the time Jesus did. So they may not make perfect sense to us because our world sometimes works a little bit differently than the world that Jesus lived in, which is why, by the way, if you go to our website, prairielakechurch.org, and you go to sermons, you can download sermon study guides for each week. And that's what we're using if those of us who are in small groups, we use that every single week. But whether you're in a small group or not discussing some of this stuff, you can grab that and we'll provide sometimes, even this week in another example, we'll provide some first century context. It's going to help you understand the stories Jesus told. Okay? All right. Let's dig into the story this weekend, okay? It's the story that Jesus tells, the story of the rich fool. The rich fool, and it's in Luke 12, 13 to 21. It's the only place we're going to be this weekend. You can grab your Bible. You can turn there right now. We're going to have it on the screen for you as well. Story of the rich fool. So you guessed it, right? This weekend, we are talking about everybody's favorite topic at church, money. Yay, right? Okay, but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Because obviously we're not talking about your money. And I know we're not talking about my money. Because what we're talking about is rich people's money. Rich people's money, right? So, pressure's off. Like if you were squirming a little bit, just sit back because we're you and I, we're not the 1%ers. We're not. We are Iowans, okay? We eat gas station pizza. That's what we do. We do. We do. We're not above that. We brag about the mileage on our American-made cars. We do that. We clip Culver's coupons to get free ice cream. That's what we do. That's what we do. Rich people don't do that, but we do. Our idea of a nice night out for a lot of us is driving 40 miles to the nearest Applebee's. I'm not above Applebee's, right? So that's who we are. This is it. So okay, all that to say, if Jesus is telling a story about a rich fool, obviously, he's not talking to you or me. But if Jesus is telling this story and it's Sunday and we're all already here and just for the sake of the exercise, let's take a look at the story. All right. Picking it up in Luke 12. Verse 16, let's watch Jesus get after those rich, not us, those rich people, and their money. Go get them, Jesus. He told them this parable, Luke 12, 16. Told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, what am I going to do? I got no place to put all this extra crop, So then he said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger ones. And in those bigger ones, I'm going to store all my surplus grain. And then once I do that, I'm going to say to myself, you got plenty laid up for several years. Just take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry, which was kind of a saying at the time. It wasn't like, go get drunk and don't do anything. It was like, just eat. Hey, just sit back and enjoy life for a second. Right? So, there's a story. What a fool. Am I right? What a fool. I mean, here's this guy, and what does he do? He farms. Dumb, right? Farming. And then what else? He works hard. He works hard, which is stupid to do that, of course. But then get this. He is successful. He's successful. Yields were really good that year, right? So what's he do? He decides to grow his operation. Idiot, right? Okay, and on top of all of that, here's his goal. Here's what he's shooting for. He wants to save up so that he can retire. What a moron, right? I hope you are picking up on my sarcasm because I am laying it down thick. And if you're not picking up on it, you are deeply offended right now, okay? All right. This is the story Jesus told. And in fairness, it's not the whole story. It's not. We're going to get to the whole story. But this part of the story is a familiar story. That's the sarcasm in it, right? It's a very familiar story to us today, even. The story goes something like this, okay? Success is earned. It is. And hard work is going to make you successful. And sure, there's years where you're luckier than not. There's years of a bumper crop and years where you're not. But hard work is success. And the rewards from my success are mine to do with whatever I choose. Really. And so what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to save more of what I've earned so I can have some security later, maybe even live a little bit easier later. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do that because this is wise. This is wise. Like, this is the story, right? The story that Jesus told. This is the fable of the grasshopper and the ant. It's a familiar one to you and me. Honestly, this story is one that I'm living out in some ways. Many ways, actually. In fact, I hope you are kind of too, right? Because success is earned, and you do have to work hard for it, usually. And it is wise to save up for later. And I'm doing that. I hope you are too, because the market has been not cooperative the last couple of years or so. It's a story that we're very familiar with, but it's not the whole story. It's not the whole story. In fact, it's in the rest of Jesus' story that we're going to see maybe what might be foolish about how this guy's operating. So let's get to the rest of the story. Verse 20. But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. Then who's going to get what you've prepared for yourself? And this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." And that's how the story ends, okay? And so now with that end in mind, let's go back to what we've already seen, the nuts and bolts of the story of how Jesus said it, right? Because here's what we saw. We saw that success is earned, right? Hard work success. We saw the rewards for my success are mine to do with whatever I choose. We saw that I'm going to save more. Some of us save more for what we earned so that we can live easy later. And it just feels like that's a wise plan. But now that we know what the end of the story is, here's what we see. It's not really wisdom. What is it? It's practical atheism. Now that, right? Like, what? What? Practical atheism. Here's what I mean. God isn't in this story or Jesus' story anywhere. Now, that might seem unfair. You might want to say, like, wait, it's like just because God's name that word isn't in that paragraph anywhere, doesn't mean that that's bad, right? I mean, how do you know that this isn't what God wants? How do you know that this guy didn't believe in God? Well, I don't know. Maybe this guy believed in God, quote unquote, whatever that means. And maybe he didn't. I mean, we don't know. Jesus doesn't say. It's just a story. But what we do know is how this guy was living out his life. In whatever way that was, God didn't seem to factor in. Really in any way. He didn't factor into how he saw his own success and the reasons for it. He didn't factor into how he was managing his resources or his investments. He didn't factor in how he was envisioning his future and where to leverage some of those. God's nowhere in this guy's story. He didn't recognize or acknowledge that God had any part in his success. He didn't ask God about what to do with what he had earned. And in fact, if you read that story again, you'll be surprised at how many times the word "I" appears in it. And so I counted, and I'm not great at math, but believe it or not, it's 7 times, right? 6 times in the first person and 1 time in the third. 7 times, which of course is a biblical number, often symbolizing completeness. Like God was completely out of focus in this guy's story. And so, when God doesn't factor in practically to any part of his mindset, when he doesn't play any real part for the reason of his success, when that's the case, then God doesn't factor in practically to any part of his decision making. You know, how he chooses to spend or save or leverage what he's earned. That's practical atheism. And here's the result. 10 times out of 10, here's the result of practical atheism. When God is practically absent from how we manage what we've earned, when that's the case, we become the sole reason for and benefactor of our earnings, our success, our money, our investments. practical atheism, 10 times out of 10, leads to sanctioned selfishness. 10 times out of 10. That's how it always works. Always works. And that's what was so foolish about how this guy was living his life, right? So let's be clear on this, because it's a story, and stories are really easy to misinterpret, right? Was he foolish for working hard? No. No. Was he foolish for being successful? Well, no. Obviously not. Was he foolish for saving up for later? No. But was he foolish for building bigger? I don't think so. But I would understand that's a pretty clear and easy conclusion to jump to, I think. Because you could read that story and think to yourself, oh, I get it. Jesus is trying to say bigger isn't better. What he's trying to say is smaller is where it's at. Jesus is anti-big and he's pro-small. And honestly, I've actually seen plenty of people use this story as a way to advance that mentality. Even when it comes to church, like all these big churches aren't what Jesus had in mind. It's small churches, stay small. That's what Jesus is saying. And I don't think that's the point. Although obviously I help lead a big multi-site church, so I have a vested interest in that not being the point, right? But I work with a lot of churches in a part-time gig that I have. I've worked with over about 50 of them now. And I work with churches of all shapes, sizes, and denominations. And I mean that. And in almost every single part of the country even. Less than 50, more than 1,000, okay? And so trust me when I say this. It's just as easy to be selfish by going big as it is to be selfish by protecting and promoting small. Turns out, selfishness is still a pretty viable option no matter the church size or the goal. So I genuinely don't think that's the point that Jesus is trying to make here. I don't think the man was foolish for that reason. I don't think it's the size of the barn that Jesus has a problem with. I think it's why he was building them. Why he was building them was just for himself and for his future and for his comfort. I mean, his practical atheism was sanctioning his own selfishness, which was foolish. And that foolishness was going to be about to become very apparent to him, because what he failed to realize and what he could not have foreseen is that the future he was planning for wasn't guaranteed. In fact, it was going to be the opposite. This guy in the story was going to die in his sleep before he could even start demoing. Here's what Jesus is saying, and really here's the one main point of the parable. Life is short. It is. Whether you live 100 years or much less than, life is short, and it's too short for us to live only for ourselves. Life is too short for you to live for yourself, for me to live for myself. It's too short. And God has bigger plans for you than just you. But what's going to happen is your and my selfishness is going to blind us from seeing those bigger plans, because our plan becomes the biggest, right? That's really the point. And now that we see the point, let's jump into the very beginning of this passage of Scripture, before Jesus even tells the story, to see what prompted him to tell it in the first place. Because remember, what a parable really means is to put something down near something else so we can see something or recognize something. So what is happening right in front of Jesus that's causing him to throw down this story? What's happening? Verse 1 of Luke 12. Meanwhile, a crowd of many thousands had gathered so that they were trampling on one another. And Jesus began to speak first to his disciples, saying, "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy." And then he says a bunch of stuff, and he gets down to verse 11, right before something else happens. And he says this: when you're brought before synagogues, rulers, and authorities in verse 11, Do not worry about how you will defend yourselves or what you will say. So, before Jesus launches into this story, the story about a rich fool, here's what's happening. A crowd is gathered around Jesus like they were starting to, and he's teaching now just his 12 disciples, but everybody in the crowd is respectfully trying to eavesdrop. Maybe not so respectfully, right? And so what Jesus is saying to these 12 guys is this: you got to watch out. You got to watch out. There's a lot of religious leaders here, probably even in the crowd, who are going to try to get you to think that their way is the right way. And eventually, these same guys are even going to drag you into court and threaten you with punishment and threaten you with your very lives if you don't agree and follow their way. But it's okay. You can trust that even in that moment, even in your final moments, maybe, God's going to be with you. He's going to tell you what you ought to say. He's going to give you the words. He's going to give you the strength. He's going to be there. I mean, it's pretty weighty stuff, right? Pretty heavy stuff. What he's talking about is what following him is eventually going to cost these guys. That's what he's talking about. And he's talking to them now so they don't get caught off guard when it happens. And he's telling them that God's going to be with them in those last moments. And because hindsight is 20/20, here's what we know. Outside of Judas Iscariot, every single one of them was martyred, died for their allegiance to Jesus. So that's what's going on. It's a heavy moment. And then this happens, okay? In verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher," and I think it's like that. "Teacher, tell my brother to divide my inheritance with me." I think it's like that, right? I think it's what's happening. Like, what is going on right now that tells you that this is a good time for you to ask that question? Think about it, right? Jesus is going like, watch out, it's going to get bad. I'm serious, it's going to get bad. These guys are going to come after you and they're going to get you. They will. But don't be afraid, right? God's going to help you know how to navigate and what to say, what to do, okay? Hi, Jesus. Well, my brother's being a jerk. He's right here. He's trying to screw me out of the money that my dead parents left us. Sorry to interrupt, but he's right here. If you could just tell him that you're on my side of this, that'd be great. And then you can go back to whatever, I don't know, I'm not sure what you were saying. Whatever you were saying, go back to it, okay? Just real quick. Remember, okay, what we said about this story, this particular one that Jesus told. Here's what we said. We said, life is too short for you to live only for yourself. And we said, God has bigger plans for you than just you. And then we said this, but the point of the story is your selfishness is going to blind you from seeing those bigger plans, from seeing that bigger story. So here it is. Here's what's happening. Jesus is delivering this important message about life and how life with God works and how, despite what they were going to experience, how their story was going to end, what God would be up to in the midst of all of it. And this guy has a front row seat to all of it. Like he got there early, he was the first to arrive, and then so many people are pressed in behind him to try to hear what Jesus is saying, but he has them all to his back with Jesus right there in front of him, and rather than listening, rather than being able to see and recognize what Jesus was saying, what has this guy's heart captured, his mind focused, his ears attended to, his tongue speaking, what has it just a chunk of money, right? That's what's on this guy's mind. And so Jesus goes from giving his disciples a warning to a different kind of warning. And he says this in 14 and 15. "Man, who appointed me judge or arbiter between you?" And he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Life's too short for us to live it for ourselves, right? God has bigger plans for us than just us. But if we live in such a way that we are at the center of the bullseye, what we're going to do is miss it. We're not going to see it. We're going to be blind to it even. Jesus is saying there's a better life than even the most successful of ones. There's a better life than a comfortable retirement. There's a bigger plan than bigger barns. But you can't see it because you're so focused on you. This guy who interrupted Jesus wanted him to pick a side between him and his brother. This guy's probably the younger brother. And we know that because it's how it usually worked in first century Palestine. The oldest son kind of had the power of attorney, so to speak. The guy who interrupted Jesus wouldn't have interrupted him if he were the older brother and had that power. And so the reason it most often worked this way, by the way, before you think that's unfair, is the wealth of the family, which back then was usually tied directly to some land, and whatever that land produced, the wealth of the family would stay in the family if it were passed down to the oldest, instead of getting divided up and farmed out. It was a way to preserve and build up generational wealth so that the next generation in the family would benefit from it. But neither his relationship with his brother nor the next generation meant anything to this guy. Bigger than his relationship with his brother, bigger than the welfare of the next generation, bigger than anything Jesus was saying at the moment that he could have picked up on. Bigger than any of that was this: just getting what was his and doing with it whatever he wanted. And I know it's easy to pile on this guy, right? But before we do, I don't know, it may have been a life-changing amount of money, right? Might have been the kind of money that would have put him into a completely different course, different social circle, wiped out all of his debts, business opportunities that would have never been on the table for him before, a completely different future, level of comfort, security, a ton of different things. But he was absolutely willing to seal off any kind of relationship with his brother once and for all, and take from any future descendants, and remain completely deaf to learning anything from Jesus and what he was saying, for the sake of what that money might do for him. And in the story that Jesus tells, he may have died the next day. That's really the very definition of poverty. See, poverty isn't the absence of resources. Poverty is the absence of generosity. You want to live poorly? Put yourself in the center of your life. Make yourself the reason, make yourself the point, Make yourself the focus of your dreams. Use relationships and even religion, Use it whatever to get what you want. Use your resources for you and no one else. Not the church, not your community, not those in need. And in doing so, you're going to create what's probably a pretty comfortable life for you until it ends. And it could tomorrow. And you'll never know the feeling of what it's like to live for the sake of others in God's bigger story. Or you can live generously and discover how abundant life with God truly is and truly can be.
Riches beyond all measure could never satisfy my heart. Even the greatest pleasure only gratifies in part. All that this world can offer can never compare to all you are. You are my greatest treasure, the desire of my heart. Whatever it costs me, I give it up freely. Whatever you ask me, I'll gladly release. All that I have is yours to begin with. Lord, I surrender give you my heart. Jesus, my treasure, you are enough for me. Veiling my imperfection, covering blemishes and stains, seeking this world's affection, an empty pursuit, it's all in vain. Jesus, you know and love me. I'm precious because you say I am. Your scars rewrote my life story, a mercy I'll never understand. Whatever it costs me, I give it up freely. Whatever you ask me, I gladly release. 'Cause all that I have is yours to begin with. Lord, I surrender. I give you my heart. Jesus, my treasure, you are enough for me. My life, every breath, my plans, every step, now till I see your face, I'll follow you, follow you. My life, every breath, my plans, every step, now till I see your face, I'll follow you, follow you. My life, every breath, my plans, every step, now till I see your face, I'll follow you, whatever it costs me. I give it up freely. Whatever you ask me, I gladly release. 'Cause all that I have is yours to begin with. Lord, I surrender. I give you my heart. Jesus, my treasure, you are enough for me.
As you heard Pastor Jesse's message, you might have had a stirring or maybe a nudge just to be generous, to take a step in generosity here today. One of his things that he said is that when we are generous, when we live generously, we discover how abundant life with God really is. So maybe that step for you is to give generously. It's one of our next steps here. So if you're kind of feeling that right now, I'd encourage you to take that step. You can give right now directly to our online campus by going to prairlakes.org/give. Or maybe you're feeling a nudge to be more generous, to invest in others, not only in yourself, to become a disciple maker. And if that's you, the right step for you is our membership class. So I'd encourage you to sign up for a membership class here this spring. And you can do that by texting membership to 99581. But kids, you are up next. Children's ministry is about ready to begin, and everyone else will see you back next week.
So I will worship you in all I do. So I live my life to show that I know you're everything to me. You're everything to me. You're everything to me. So I live my life to show that I know you're everything to me. You taught us a brand new way to follow you in what we do and say. Jesus, you are for us. Help us be more like you every day. Jesus, I thank you. I just wanna sing. You're all that I need. You say that I mean so much to you. You love me like a friend and help me through. So I will worship you in all I do. So I live my life to show that I know you're everything to me. You're everything to me. You're everything to me. So I live my life to show that I know you're everything to me. I'm gonna lift my voice to you. Jesus, you make me sing. I'm gonna live my life for you. You're everything to me. I'm gonna lift my voice to you. Jesus, you make me sing. I'm gonna live my life for you. You're everything to me. You say that I mean so much to you. You love me like a friend and help me through. So I will worship you in all I do. So I live my life to show that I know. You say that I mean so much to you. You love me like a friend and help me through. So I will worship you in all I do. So I live my life to show that I know you're everything to me. You're everything to me. You're everything to me. So I live my life to show that I know you're everything to me.
Welcome to Story Lab.
This week, we're talking about respect while we take a look at the story of two sisters and how they spent time with others. Come on, Amaya. Hey, I'm Zeke.
And I'm Amaya, and we're talking about respect, which is showing others they're important by what you say and do.
You're important to me.
I'm glad to hear
But
it.
see, that's not enough, is it? Saying it isn't enough. I have to do something to show you're important.
Okay, you could start by showing me what you've planned for today.
You're gonna love it.
What is it?
3 guesses.
I need one clue.
It's cold.
We're going skiing?
Do you even know how to ski?
The only time I tried, I sprained my ankle.
Well, we're not going skiing.
I need another clue. We're eating ice cream!
You like ice cream,
I
right?
love ice cream.
Enough to ski on it?
I'd rather eat it.
Great. I've got everything ready.
This is awesome. Where's the ice cream?
I haven't made it yet.
Haven't made it. Doesn't that take like super long to make?
You're totally worth it.
Okay then, I think we better get started.
Let's make it. All you need is heavy whipping cream, vanilla, and sugar. Step 1. Pour all the ingredients into the small baggie. 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. 1 tablespoon of sugar. That is not enough.
I don't think so.
And now, seal the bag.
Okay, but what's the salt for? I don't want salty ice cream.
Okay, this is the really cool part. I mean, actually cool. So you know how you see trucks putting salt on icy roads?
Yeah, I guess I thought it melts the ice or something.
Nope. Salt actually lowers the melting point of ice, which takes us to step 2. Step 2. Fill the large bag halfway with ice, then add a 1/4 cup of salt. Step 3. Place a small bag inside of the large bag. And pour more ice on top. And now we seal the large bag.
Okay, but I still don't get how the salt works.
Adding salt to ice when making ice cream quickly lowers the temperature of the ice, which is needed to make the ice cream solid. Without salt, the outer ice doesn't get cold enough to freeze the ice cream, and it will stay liquid.
So, salt makes the ice colder while it melts.
Yep. And that means the ice cream freezes faster, which makes for smaller ice crystals and fluffier ice cream. Now we get to step 5. Shake it up.
For how long?
As long as it takes.
But I thought the salt was supposed to make it go faster.
But not that fast.
Okay. Want some help?
No, I'm doing this for you.
Okay.
Could we maybe edit this into a cool montage? Is it done yet?
It looks pretty soft.
I guess I better keep shaking it then.
Alright. While you do that, it's time for
The story before the story.
Today we're in Luke, the 3rd book in the New Testament. But before Luke, in the very beginning, out of a deep love, God made an amazing world. But when people turned away from God, the world was broken.
God made a plan to draw people back into relationship. So, at the right time, God sent a tiny baby to be born in the small town of Bethlehem, God's very own son, Jesus.
When Jesus grew up, he began to travel from town to town, teaching and healing, which is where our story starts.
Take it away.
Hey everyone, you can call me Brian.
Hey, Brian.
One day, as Jesus was walking with his disciples, he arrived in the town of Bethany, where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Martha and her sister Mary and brother Lazarus were close friends and followers of Jesus. They knew what an honor it was for him to visit their home.
Jesus, you sit right here. I know you must be starving after such a long day. Dinner will be ready soon, but here are some raisins and figs, and Mary just brought cool water from the well. Let me know if you need anything at all.
It was common for men to sit at the feet of Jewish rabbis and learn from them, so Lazarus and the other men crowded around to hear Jesus speak, while Martha and Mary worked to prepare a meal for Jesus. Martha must have put every ounce of energy into cooking the best food possible. But after a while, Mary left the kitchen to come and sit down at Jesus' feet just like the men. Now, as the afternoon wore on, Martha kicked into high gear. Boy, she chopped, she roasted, she basted, she baked, she cleaned, and she decorated, flying from one task to the next. And as the temperature in the kitchen, grew warmer, so did Martha's temper. I mean, Mary was over there with Jesus doing nothing, while Martha was left to handle the entire meal on her own. Martha probably felt overwhelmed and annoyed. And at last, She couldn't keep quiet anymore.
Does she think dinner is just going to magically appear on the table? Lord,
Everything got quiet. Everyone stared at Martha.
my sister left me to do the work by myself. Don't you care? Tell her to help me.
Everyone waited to see what would happen. Would Jesus be angry with Martha for interrupting? Or would he tell Mary to give up her spot at his feet and go to the kitchen? Instead, Jesus looked at Martha with deep compassion in his eyes. Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Really, only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Jesus wasn't angry with Martha for working hard to make a meal for him. It was important work that had to be done. But Martha had gotten distracted from the most important way of showing love to Jesus, through her time and attention.
So, what did Martha do?
Well, we don't actually know how Martha responded. Maybe she did sit down for a while to listen to Jesus, but we do know that later, Martha showed great faith that Jesus could heal her brother. And she was one of the first to declare that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, I feel like Martha a lot of times with school and homework and chores, it's really hard not to worry about things not getting done if I take a break.
Well, you're not alone. We can all lose track of what's really important.
So,
What's our part in the story?
Well, Martha was doing lots of good stuff for Jesus, but she missed spending time with him.
So, the best way to show love for Jesus is by spending time with him first.
Yeah, and there are lots of ways to do that. You can spend time with Jesus by reading scripture and talking with him about what you read.
Yeah, you can pray and talk with Jesus about anything that's on your heart.
You can even spend time with him by listening to worship music.
Or find a quiet place and ask Jesus to be there with you.
Where we spend our time shows what matters most to us. Spending time with Jesus is the most important thing.
And spending time is a great way to show others that they matter too.
Yeah, like when you get home from school, maybe take a couple of minutes to talk to your mom and dad about your day instead of going right into doing your homework.
Or when your little sister asks you to do sidewalk chalk, you can put down your game and hang out with her.
Maybe your parents want you to go visit your grandma at the retirement home. You might be tempted to grumble, but remember that when you take time to listen to her stories, you show how important she really is.
That's a lot to think about.
It sure is. See you next time.
So here's the thing. Take time to show others that they are important. Speaking of which, where's my ice cream?
I finished it up and put it in the freezer.
Do I get to eat it?
Yeah, let's go.
This is actually not salty.
Do you feel important?
Absolutely.
Then my work here is done.
Thanks for joining us in the Story Lab.
See you next time.
Ah, so good.